Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 8th Wall live learning session. This is our weekly series where we invite our developer community to come join us for an interactive session of tips, tricks related to WebAR development. So in each session, we're going to talk about what's new at 8th Wall. So things like recent announcements, newer updated features, new sample projects, and so on. Then we'll dive into a relevant demo or topic, followed by some live Q&A. If you have any questions as we go along, please enter them into the Zoom Q&A window. The session will be recorded, and once the recording is ready, it's going to be posted on YouTube. We'll also email it to everyone who's registered for today's session. Before we jump into the content, a couple of quick introductions. My name is Tony Tamarchio. I'm the Director of Technical Operations at 8th Wall, and I'm joined again by Rigel Benton, our lead product designer. So it's very likely that you've already seen us or interacted with us through our developer Slack channel. If you aren't a member, please do sign up at 8thwall.com/Slack. There are almost 3,000 members. It's a great place to interact with the developer community, ask questions, and share what you've created. We really value developer input, so if you have any feedback, feature requests, issues, please do reach out to us at any time. With that, let's jump into a quick update on some new things from the 8th Wall team, and then I'm going to be turning things over to Rigel for today's demos. So what's new? In last week's session, I took you through end-to-end cloud editor development. We combined a number of our sample projects from the 8th Wall project library, and we took different pieces from each of them to create a fully customized experience that involved switching 3D models, animations, gestures, tap interactions, animation switching, and so on. The project library is definitely a great place to get started as you're building WebAR experiences. So we also have another set of projects that you can pull from, and let's go through some of these here today. We call this the 8th Wall Playground. So you can find this at 8thwall.com/playground. And the projects found here are usually the result of questions that pop up repeatedly on our Slack channel. So these are oftentimes spin-offs of some of the sample projects we already have. Topics that come up frequently are, how do I take 3D models and add hotspots? Or how do I use URL parameters to customize an experience? Or switching between front and back camera, between 3DOF and 6DOF modes, things like that. So I just want to highlight a couple of these projects here today, but I definitely encourage you to also take a look at these. The first one is this one called iFrame hotspots. So we've seen a number of different experiences where there perhaps was a 3D model of a car or a shoe or something to that effect, and you want to bring that in front of the user in augmented reality, but you want to allow them to interact with it, to highlight certain key areas that they might want to take a look at. So this is a great starting point where it's pretty basic. It has a 3D model. And there are a couple of different hotspots. You can tap on them to either bring up something in 3D space or in 2D space. It's definitely suggest you take a look at that. Again, for all of the project library projects, as well as the playground projects, you can try it out live. So go ahead here. If I want to scan this QR code, it'll bring me to the link in my phone. And we can test this out live. Feel free to play along as we go through the session here today. So here I've got my hotspot example. Got a 3D model. I can interact with it and move it. I can scale it. And then I can tap on any of the hotspots here and pull up more information. And again, it brings up a kind of a hotspot indicator in 3D space, as well as a 2D element there, but you could certainly customize this the way that you want. Tap to close. So that's just one example. Let's close this tab here. Another topic that comes up, that's been coming up frequently, is how do I customize an experience with URL parameters? Maybe I want to pass in an ID or the name of a different 3D model. You're building a product viewer or something like that. So this is a basic example that just deals with primitives. You could certainly build upon this and have it swap 3D models, change textures, things like that. So basically in this case, you pass a color parameter, you pass a shape parameter, and it'll go ahead and make those changes and pass that in dynamically as your experience loads. We've had a lot of questions also recently about how do I switch between front and back cameras within an experience. So we have the swap camera settings project you should take a look at. And in this case, you can switch between what we call disable world tracking. So world tracking, also known as our SLAM tracking. So this is how you can disable it or switch between the front and the back camera. So you can see a preview of that. Also, a lot of questions recently about dealing with custom fonts. So I put together a project for that. Again, as most of these are spin-offs of other projects, this was the Sandcastle, the gesture manipulator project, and I just added a handful of 5 or 6 different ways to load custom fonts into a project. And you can certainly decide which one is most appropriate for your particular use case, but this is a great example of dealing with custom fonts. A lot of questions also about swapping 3D models, like on the fly. So this is a kind of a spin-off of our animation mixer demo. And it's just a simple experience with a button that whenever I tap the button, it just swaps out one model for the next model in a list that I've got of 3D models. Again, you could customize this. Maybe you don't want a button, maybe you want to tap or have some other interaction that would trigger it. But this really just shows kind of the principle of how would you take advantage of that. And then finally, the other one I want to highlight is swapping textures for your 3D models. This comes up a lot. So we put together a little sample project on that. And this one's just basic, or you literally just tap on the screen, and when you tap, it switches out one texture for another texture in the 3D model. So again, that's the 8th Wall Playground. You can find it by going to 8thwall.com/playground. It's a great extension to the existing project library that we already have. And I highly suggest that you check it out if you haven't already. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Rigel, and he's going to jump into a set of live demos here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. So today I'd like to talk about face effects. We announced this feature back in May, and it has been a really it's actually been a highly requested feature for some time. People really love not only being able to, decorate their face and even add interactivity to like face-based content, but also the ability to capture that as media and then easily share it with their friends. And so back in May, whenever we announced this, it included both of those things. It included the face tracking and as well as face mesh generation. And I'll get into how you do all this stuff in a moment. But also in our first public demo, in-browser video recording and photo capture, as well as being able to easily and quickly share those things out. And of course, working on iOS and Android both. And so if you remember, there's actually there's a wide variety of different effects in this initial video that we launched, showing off everything from custom shaders to applying videos to the face mesh that gets generated whenever you visit the web page, PBR materials, some basic makeup try-on, even here's like a physics chain that's reacting, so it does have a sense of where down is, so physics can work. My horrible acting skills at play as well, can't leave that out. But yeah, there's like a really wide variety of things you can do with this, and it all of course runs inside of your phone's web browser. So I wanted to talk about a few different ways that you can get started with this. As Tony had mentioned last week regarding our project library, this is always like the best place to start to try to find things that are similar to what you're trying to achieve and to be able to quickly and easily preview these things. The nice thing about face effects is you can even try these out in the whatever browser you're in, right? You don't necessarily have to be on a mobile device in order to give it a spin. And that can lead to some pretty powerful integrations. So let's say you want to actually, this is our homepage right now. If you scroll down here, if you want to embed face effects in your current website, you can actually do this quite easily within an iFrame. And so let's see if this will kick in here with Zoom running. Yeah, great. So you can see here, I've got my full face effects project running. That the same website would be running just as easily on my phone. No worries. And we can see all the different effects I can do. And the user didn't have to leave the page or do anything. And one cool thing also is, of course, video recording works in desktop, Chrome, Safari, whatever. It's recording audio, but you can on and off the microphone at your discretion, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Of course, you can download that video, and then boom, now it's on my computer, and I can share this wherever I'd like. So pretty powerful stuff. So I'll go back into the project library and work through sort of the main 4 examples. So face effects, just like every other eighth wall computer vision solution, it works across multiple frameworks, right, for rendering. So 3 of these are inside iFrame, but we also have a Three.js example, and this also works with the usual suspects, Babylon and Play Canvas and Amazon Sumerian. So, but for the purposes of today, I was going to walk you through this one. Before we jump into that, though, I want to show you, some of the more complex examples. And whenever you jump into one of these project library projects, we have an extensive README in here that describes what's happening, what each of the components are doing, all the parameters within each of these components. And many of these take advantage of our open source xrextras library. And so while this is all documented in the README, you can actually go directly to our xrextras repo on GitHub and sort through where all this code is coming from and customize it to your heart's content. So definitely encourage you to go and do that. Similarly here, we're using a physics engine called ammo.js to handle the chain physics of the object. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and show you this one. So this is our basic iFrame face effects project that is really simple to get up and running. And it's important because it includes the 3 sort of core components of what makes a face effects project unique with eighth wall. The first is face anchors. So that's the ability to append objects to various anchors around the face. And all of those anchors are listed out here. So we call them face attachment points. If you take any of these strings and you apply it to your xrextras face attachment primitive, it will append whatever it is that you're trying to attach to the face to each of these points. So that's really helpful to remember. And you can attach things to any number of these points at any point in time. And we've got all kinds of different stuff in there. Nose tip, left eye, outer corner. It gets pretty granular. The next part is going to be the face mesh. So this is the, like I mentioned before, this is the ability to, as soon as the camera opens, it finds your face, and then it can create a mesh that's sort of form fit to your facial structure. And that can lead to some pretty amazing effects. But in this particular example, it's pretty simple. It's just applying a 2D texture against your face with a transparency, like an alpha channel, so that it looks like a tattoo. And then the last bit, of course, is the media recorder, which is also included in this project. So inside the project itself, which, by the way, you can still read the README after you've coded the project, this is what our scene looks like here. So I'll blow it up so you can more easily read this. And so the first thing that you'll want to do whenever you create a face effects project is you'll want to make sure that this has the xrface component. And of course, I'm using iFrame today for the purpose of this demo, but you'll want to use the xrface component. And then it has a variety of different parameters that are helpful for customizing what you want to be tracked. So the first would be, use mirrorDisplay true. This is helpful for whenever you're using camera direction front as opposed to rear. So you're looking at your face, and then now whenever I move my hand, it responds as if I'm looking through a mirror on my phone. If you have it reversed, it can be kind of disorienting because it isn't properly flipped. And so you want to make sure if you have front on, you'll likely want to have mirrorDisplay on as well. Allowed devices any. This allows you to do what I was just doing with the desktop embed, where ordinarily within eighth wall project, we require motion sensors for a world tracking project. And so because desktop computers don't have motion sensors, we default to you know, a QR code so that users can scan that with their phones. But whenever you set this allowed devices any on a project that doesn't require motion tracking, which would include you know, face effects, obviously, but also image targets if you have world tracking disabled. This allows you to basically, you know, display this in any place you'd like, and then the QR code doesn't appear and the camera opens up instead. So this is a pretty powerful parameter here that you'll want to leverage. And I encourage anyone that's using face effects to not limit it to just their phones, because you never know where someone could be opening this up or sending it to someone else. And then finally, we have the meshGeometry. And this is basically saying, you know, of this list of things that we're able to construct geometry for regarding the face mesh, what would we like, right? And so by specifying eyes, face, mouth, we're saying we want to construct the geometry for each of these things. And typically, even by default, it will just do all of it. And you know, that's sort of checks most of the boxes. But let's say you just want to render the eyes because you want to like the eyes to glow. Well, then you can just specify that, and it doesn't need to actually create the rest of the geometry. You know, a couple other small things. So one is this xrextras-pause-on-hidden component. This is actually really great because you can see I'm on my phone right now, and you know, on iOS 14. You can see I have this at the top left or the top right corner of my screen. It's indicating that my camera is on, and so is my microphone actually, because you know, I allowed that to happen at the beginning when I configured my media recorder. But when I leave the app, you'll notice it actually turns off on that top bar, and that means that like we're no longer, the microphone is no longer activated, the camera is no longer running. If you don't include some way of turning off that microphone after the user's requested permissions, it will remain on. And you know, there's no reason to have it on. One, it's consuming battery, but also, you know, even though the website isn't doing anything, it's not like anyone's listening to anything. It's just sort of, you know, best practice to always turn off the, you know, the sensors that you're not utilizing and the user isn't utilizing. So that's a really important one I wanted to highlight. So kind of going through what the project itself is doing here, we have loaded in our A assets, which is where all of our 3D assets load, the 3D glasses, which I'm wearing, but also this object that's called a head occluder. And if we actually go and look at this head occluder object, it's kind of like a weird, like faceless head. And what we're doing with this is we're actually applying this to the center of the tracked face, right, offset by a certain amount, and then we're applying a hider material to it. And this is actually going to block rendering of anything beyond it. So you can see as like I turn my head from side to side, the edges of the glasses are actually being clipped by that head occluder object. So that makes it look a lot more realistic. Otherwise, the you know, anything that you had sort of behind the head or, you know, along the edge, you would be able to see it through my head, which is not ideal. So, so if you're doing anything like this, where you're applying things to the face, you probably want to include this, this head occluder object. And then the next thing is we're loading in using these xrextras primitives. And these are basically just like shortcuts to create PBR materials on the fly. You know, if you like, instead of loading in an xrextras resource, these xrextras face mesh components, you know, instead of using this, you can also just use a normal A-frame material, and then anything that takes, it'll use that. This just makes it easier for us to create these PBR materials that use a lot of different textures to construct. And so, you know, we actually have a lot of this documented again inside of our README, talking about, you know, the various, you know, xrextras materials and everything that you can do with that. So, so yeah, but today it's pretty simple. It's just a tattoo. And, you know, and then the next thing you'll notice is we have these capture button and capture preview primitives. And I'll talk about this last, but this is basically adding these primitives to your project will automatically allow you to take photos, you know, display the preview window for the media that's been captured, as well as record videos, you know, the video playback, this mute button, which will play it back. displaying that end card, which I'll also talk about towards the end, you'll want to include both of these in the project. There's a third primitive as well, which is called config, and again, I'll get into that, but that allows you to do to customize every element of that capture process that you see. And so that'll be really helpful whenever you you decide you want to start using that. And by the way, the xrextras media recorder capabilities, that extends well beyond just face effects, right? Like that works with your image target projects. It works with world tracking, and even if you didn't include either tracking, right, you can still use it for whatever you'd like to do, that requires video recording. So you'll notice right here, right in the middle, we've got this xrextras face anchor primitive. And this is really important because basically we're saying that like, we want to generate, we want to use face anchors in our project, and everything inside of this is going to be, utilizing that, that capability. And so here we have our head occluder, like I was talking about earlier, and its sort of default is it's appended to the face. So I've offset it on its z-axis by a very small amount so that it sort of pushes back into my head as opposed to just my face. And then the face mesh, right? So we have our xrextras face mesh primitive. When this is included, it's going to generate the face mesh. If you don't include this, it won't. And then the material resource, like I said earlier, is this tattoo, which is this 8-tat texture that we load in. And one thing too is if you're making, sort of face tattoos or, anything to do with the face and the face mesh, you can download this like UV black or UV bright PNG, which is included in the project. And you can import these into Photoshop or Illustrator or wherever you'd like. And then you can use, this is a canonical representation of all of the points and everything that are being generated here. So you can use this as a UV map and begin customizing this however you'd like. In fact, to do things like, to position the tattoos precisely, I did a combination of bringing in the UV texture into Substance, as well as we have a canonical face mesh at the bottom you can download right here for reference assets. And then this is a 3D model that you can bring in to whatever 3D modeling software you'd like, and then use that as sort of the basis for customizing and creating your own materials or even modifying that object. And so sort of cruising down here, we've got our xrextras face attachment primitive. And this is where we specify the point, right? The attachment point to what we want everything inside this to be appended to. And so here it's nose bridge, right? So it's right here between my eyes. And that's where we're placing my glasses model. And, and we're repositioning it a little bit higher than wherever the point is. That's what this position is doing. It's offsetting that. And then as a child of my glasses, I'm actually generating each of these lenses as a different 3D object. And so you can see how I'm doing this. And then finally, at the end, we've got our lights set up, and that's helping with like creating glare on my lenses. You can kind of see. So yeah, so this is pretty cool, and we can customize any aspect of these things. But what if we want to add some interactivity to it? And and one way of doing that is, of course, like through touch interaction. You want to bring in any kind of external thing. You can do that too using live APIs. You want to have the weather change the face mesh to reflect that. You're, of course, because it's web AR, you can do any of those things. But let's say you just want to use your face to do the trigger, right? And so I sort of started with this face effects mouth open project, which is located in the playground, which Tony was showing you earlier. And it does a very simple thing, right? It takes the position of one of your attachment points, measures the distance, and then if it meets a certain threshold, then we're going to fire an event that that does something, right? And so that's basically all this is doing. It's pretty simple. Like I said, we're generating an object. In this point, we're calling it lower, right? And then it's a face attachment point where appending it to the lower lip. And then as my lips move back and forth, what we're going to do is change the color of a cube depending on the distance threshold that I set for that thing. And so as I've already done this work, I'm going to uncomment this particular section here, save and build, and you'll see in a moment, once this thing goes, I'll reload my device. And then here I've got a nice cube decoration on my chin. And if I open my mouth, it turns blue. And then when I close it, it goes back to red. So it's a really simple thing we're doing here. But you can imagine, sort of starting with this idea and then expanding upon that and maybe creating, face puppets that have blend shapes that respond to your actions. Or, you want to open your mouth and particle effects can come out, like breathing fire. Or, it's like I said, it's a simple thing, but it really is extensible in a lot of creative ways. So, so definitely, experiment with that. And then the last thing I want to talk about, like I had promised previously, was the capture. So for capture, we're going to add another line here, and it is the xrextras capture config. So let's put that in there. And then now we have this in here, we can actually start specifying parameters. And I'll pull up the documentation. So you can follow along with what I'm doing. But if you go to the docs, right, eighthwall.com/docs/web, and then you come down to this customizing video recording section, this is going to give you everything you need to customize the capture mode, the preview window, but most importantly, the capture configuration itself. And so for capture mode, this is important because basically you can see right here, right? If I tap, it will take a photo. If I hold and release, it will record a video, right? But if let's say that I just want it to only take photos. Well, I can set it to just take photos. If I want it to set it to fixed mode, what that'll do is I'll basically turn off photo functionality. And here, let me try that. So if I go here and I do capture mode fixed, this is great because it'll basically be a toggle. So now if I tap it, it'll begin recording. If I tap it again, it'll stop it. And this is really awesome for if you need to do touch interactions, right? So I can tap record. I'm now hands-free, right? I can do my my TikToks, whatever the kids are wanting to do these days. And then I can finish that recording, come back, and download it. And then what happens is when I hit that download button, it's going to download to my downloads folder on my iOS device or my downloads folder on my Android device. And then I can access that download either from the top right corner and then view that from there, or we even included a handy view button that will just take you directly into your iCloud. And I just set this phone up yesterday, so it's still getting set up. But yeah, you can see the video I just recorded, and of course from here, you can save that video, you can share it over text message or whatever you'd like to do. And so that's sort of the share flow. If you have web share API level 2 available, so like most Android devices, if you're on Chrome, it will automatically do this. It'll pull up the share sheet instead of taking you to a different place. And so, on iOS, that's actually already available behind an experimental flag. So, but you're not likely to expect your users to have that flag on. So anticipate this being the standard flow for now. And of course, like I said, all of the interactions that are taking place here are part of the open source xrextras. So if you want to customize that, you can get into the source code quite easily from our GitHub and change that however you'd like. But yeah, and I guess the next thing I want to talk about is the end card. So you notice that at the very end it'll fade out, right? And then it'll display this card. And by default, the card includes a cover image of whatever you've uploaded as part of your basic information in your settings. So, you know, I think we've mentioned this before, but this basic information that you set up, it actually corresponds to metadata that can be viewed elsewhere. So the project title becomes your title of your website. The description appears in a text message or a social post, but this image appears in a lot of different places. So the end card is one of those places where if I want to include an image, you know, I can, let's see, where's my...
Rigel, really quick while you're doing that, the Docs browser is covering up your phone screen. So if you're trying to share the phone, we're not seeing that right now.
Good point. Thanks.
There you go.
So in celebration of this week's successful ISS docking, I'm going to upload this. So if I save this, now this, you know, rocket's landing image will be my cover image for my project. And not sure if I have to save and build again. I may not have to. We'll try it anyway. Give it a second. Record. And then, by the way, you can set the max record time. There we go. So now we're encoding that cover image as that, as part of the end card. And in every part of that end card, right, that's all customizable as well. And so if we go back here, you can see in here, we can change the max record duration, and that would be, you know, the total amount of time that you'd want someone to be able to record. You know, it's almost more important for the fixed mode than it is for the hold mode, because people typically won't hold their finger down for 60 seconds or however long you want someone to record. But fixed is pretty simple to implement that. You can change the max dimensions of the captured video, which is great for keeping file size low. Or if there's like another step that you want to include where maybe the user uploads it somewhere, then keeping that upload time low as well. You know, we have the end card can be turned on and off, and the max duration doesn't count against the end card, right? So you can have it be 15 seconds, and then we actually append that end card after the 15 seconds. And so next thing would be if you wanted to change that cover image, maybe you want the cover image for your project to be one thing, but then the cover image for your video to be a different thing for the end card. You can do that too. You can easily apply watermarks. So if we want to do that real quickly, I can do a watermark image URL, and I can include this inside my capture config. And then this will just be my, oh, you know what? I might have to do this as an A asset item. Basically here, logo X. And I want my watermark image, and this will just be applied to the whole video, not just the end card, the whole thing leading up to the end card. And then you can even customize how big that is and where it's displayed, what corner, all kinds of things like that. And then I guess lastly, I wanted to just briefly mention audio. So one thing that's pretty cool about being able to, here, you see my screen again. So one thing that's pretty cool about the way that audio works is by default, the scene audio that's included in your project will be recorded as part of the video. And if you have the microphone on, which is also the default, right? You notice at the beginning, every time I restart my site, it requests both microphone and video sort of coupled, so you don't have to ask the user multiple times for different permissions requests. So by default, you're getting microphone audio and you're getting scene audio. And but that's all configurable. If you want to if you have no need for recording the microphone, you think that maybe your users will be turned off to the idea of giving permissions to their microphone to a website they don't know what they're going to use it for, that's really easy to turn off. You basically set this request mic value to manual. And what that means is we're actually, you can manually trigger that request later. It's off by default right now. And so when I reload, you notice it doesn't actually ask me anymore for microphone permissions. So, so that's great. And the reason why you might want to do it manually later is if you did have like, you know, maybe a tiered step-by-step permission structure as part of your load screen. Or, you know, maybe you have a microphone button that you expose near the capture button that someone wants to tap, they can then start like recording their microphone that way. And so that's an important one. And then the scene audio, of course, you can decide you don't want to record the scene audio, or you do want to record the microphone, or mix and match those things. And we have actually some pretty powerful APIs for allowing you to record some things, to add in sounds later, or modulate the recorded microphone audio at a later point during the video encode process. And so it's a similar sort of technique to what we're doing with the end card or the watermark, where we're going back through the captured video, and then before we turn it into a file, we encode a bunch of the things that you've decided to customize. So it's a pretty powerful thing. And I guess a really small thing is the capture preview, which of course you can modify what the text says. So if you want to localize the share or view buttons, you can do that quite easily. And then all of these have events that are fired. So if you want to hook into different events and have things happen at certain points, you can do this too. So, you know, one example would be if you had, you wanted it to begin recording, sort of automatically when the user reaches a certain point in the experience, and then you'd be able to like perhaps play back an instant replay of something they just did. Or maybe you're trying to scare them, and then now they have that that file on hand if they want to share their authentic scare reaction or laughter or whatever. We allow you to do all of this stuff quite easily. So yeah, so it's kind of a lot, but I wanted to go through all of that and talk about all the different ways that that face effects can achieve your creative dreams. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Tony. Thank you.
Awesome, great. Thanks very much, Rigel. Let me pull back up the slides here really quick. And at this point, we're going to open things up for Q&A. So let me start sharing this out again. Okay, here we go. Okay, great. So we do have a couple of questions here. The first one, is there an example of unlocking different levels? For instance, the user tries on 3 hats, but to try on the 4th, they need to do something like register in a web form. So yeah, you can absolutely do that. We don't have a specific demo or sample project that shows you, but I guess one thing to think about would be, how are you switching between the different hats? Is there a button that they press to like switch between the different hat models? I mean, I could see you very easily just having like a counter variable in your code. And when they, view the first hat, you set it to 1. When they view it, the second one, you set it to 2, and so on. And when that variable hits a certain threshold, that could be the trigger to pull up like a 2D kind of form element on top of the web AR experience that you then have them register. Maybe you only want that to trigger like when they actually, place the hat on their head. So also the thing to keep in mind is that with basically both with our image targets and with our face effects, we're firing events when different things happen. So we fire an event when an image or a face is found, when it's lost, things like that. And you can use that to make decisions as to what what happens in your game logic, if you will. So Rigel, if there's anything else you want to add to that.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's helpful to remember that, the various ways you can trigger certain things don't necessarily have to be AR related, right? I mean, you have UI that exists in sites that can be changing various states, and then, kind of tracking all of that and then using all that information to modify the AR, as opposed to like using the AR to modify that.
Exactly. Good question. Okay, next question is about if you wanted to add text to an object, Rigel, should you use mirrored or unmirrored experience and why?
So text, if you have a texture that is being read left to right, and then you apply that to a face that has then been mirrored, then the text will appear reversed. If you swap the texture right before you upload it, then it won't appear reversed. And that's sort of interesting. That's actually what I did with the, with the face tattoo. But I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can get around this sort of thing. If, I think particularly when you're recording video, that's when it becomes kind of tricky because, I don't know if you've ever recorded your own, if you've ever done like a video selfie on an iPhone, it will show you left to right, right? But then whenever you play it back, it'll be reversed in the Photos app, which is sort of unexpected. If you go into Snapchat or Instagram, it won't flip it. So, we record it, as it is, as it appears on your screen. We're not trying to outsmart the user, but no, it's a good question.
We have another question about the recording from last week's session. I'll check with the team to see if it's up on YouTube or not, or what the status is. Generally, after these sessions, it's not going to be posted immediately. We might to take the team a little bit of time to edit out the beginning or the end, to clean it up a little bit and then get it there. But it should be up there soon, and we'll send out an update once previous sessions are available online for you to view them again. With that, we're just about out of time here. So definitely want to thank everyone for their time and attendance here today. Hopefully you learned some new things, new tips and tricks. Rigel, thanks for the great demos here today. Again, follow us on Twitter. We're at The Eighth Wall. Also, again, if you haven't already joined our developer Slack channel, I strongly suggest that you do. It's as easy as going to eighthwall.com/Slack and signing up. Again, there are about 3,000 people there. Great place to ask questions, show what you built, and so on. So with that, thanks again for joining us here today, and we look forward to seeing you on a future Eighth Wall